Wonderful. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today for the first of our pre-election media education briefings. I'm Leigh Chapman, Acting Secretary of the Commonwealth and Pennsylvania's Chief Election Official. With 28 days to go before the November 8th election, I'd like to spend this time with you discussing what's new for the general election and what to expect over the next month. Pennsylvania's elections have undergone momentous changes in the last several years for a variety of reasons, including legislation such as Act 77 of 2019, which brought no excuse mail-in voting to the Commonwealth, and court rulings and a multitude of lawsuits. Due to these changes, it's critical that the Department of State educates voters, the media, and the public so everyone has the information they need so that voters can cast their ballot and have confidence that their vote will be counted. We appreciate working with all of you and providing you with accurate, trusted information that you can share with your viewers, listeners, readers, and subscribers. Today's discussion is all about transparency and education. These two words, along with the word truth, are key to combating misinformation and disinformation about elections that Americans hear every day. And getting the truth to the public about how Pennsylvania's elections are administered is the best way to debunk current mis and disinformation and to pre-bunk potential future mis and disinformation. So with our goals for our time together clearly laid out, let's dive into the meat of what we're here to discuss. What's new since the May primary for the November general election? Those changes fall into four areas. Updated guidance documents from the Department of State for county election offices and voters. The Department of State directive for counties to implement a post-election pre-certification risk-limiting audit. The effects of Act 88 of 2022, and the new daily mail ballot reports on our website. I'll start with the updated guidance the Department of State recently provided for counties and voters. Before I provide a highlight of the updated guidance documents, though, I want to explain exactly what it means when the Department of State issues directives to county election offices and guidance to counties and voters. As the Chief Election Official for the Commonwealth, it is my job to ensure counties have the information they need to administer each election. One of the ways we provide that information to them is through guidance and directives. It is our expectation that counties follow the guidance and directives issued by the department. There are three reasons we issue new or updated guidance to counties. One, for legislative changes, two, for relevant court decisions, and three, for requests from counties for process or procedural clarifications. We maintain an archive of previously issued guidance documents on our website, where we organize them by topic and issuance date. When you go to our website, vote.pa.gov, you will see we recently issued several updated guidance documents. Highlights include the following. On mail-in and absentee ballots, we advise counties that undated and wrongly dated mail ballots are to be counted. We also clarified that all mail ballots that have tape on their inner and/or outer envelopes should be counted as well. On the voter intimidation guidance, we updated the information so that county officials know they should report any intimidation that happens at drop boxes, just as they would report intimidation at a polling place. And broadly, we streamlined the guidance to counties on handling and processing military and overseas ballots. We also streamlined the guidance on poll by the appropriate basis for lodging challenges at the polls. In addition to those guidance documents, we also issued a directive instructing counties to conduct post-election pre-certification risk-limiting audits, known as RLAs, beginning with this election. In 2019, the department convened a post-election audit work group. This work group researched, discussed, and experimented with different types of RLAs, and it helped the department lead the vast majority of counties through pilots of RLAs over the last few years. Considered the gold standard of election audits, an RLA is a scientifically designed procedure that uses statistical methods to confirm the outcome of the election. For more information about RLAs, please go to our website, where you will also find the third report of the post-election audit work group, which was issued on September 30th. RLAs are a type of robust post-election audit that have been recommended by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Senate Select Intelligence Committee, and many other experts as a key part of election infrastructure. As of this election, all 67 counties are directed by the Department of State to complete a post-election pre-certification RLA. This means that after election night, but before they certify the results to me in late November, every county is expected to complete an RLA. The RLA will be completed in addition to the 2% statistical audit that counties are required by statute to perform after each primary and general election. While I'm speaking of what happens after Election Day, I'd like to turn to discussing when we will see unofficial results. I know many of you have already written extensively about the bipartisan Act 88 legislation. What's important for you to know today is that Act 88 did make several changes to election administration, including providing $45 million to counties and requiring that counties pre-canvass mail-in ballots starting at 7 a.m. on Election Day, and continuously count mail-in ballots starting at the close of polls. Nonetheless, Act 88 didn't implement the one reform that would have had the biggest impact on allowing Pennsylvania to have results sooner, providing for pre-canvassing of mail-in ballots before Election Day. For years, county election officials, the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, and Governor Tom Wolf had repeatedly asked the General Assembly to pass meaningful legislation to allow for this practice, which is common in other states. So next month, as with the 5 most recent elections, the earliest counties can begin pre-canvassing mail-in ballots is 7 a.m. on Election Day. We anticipate this means that once again, Pennsylvania will not have unofficial results on election night. We know everyone, voters, you, your viewers, and readers want results on election night, but we must again ask for patience. An accurate count of all eligible votes is paramount, and it cannot be rushed. Election workers must be given a reasonable amount of time to do their jobs thoroughly. Unofficial results will be available within a few days, and it's critically important that all of you understand and that you convey to your audiences that this delay does not mean anything nefarious is happening. It simply means that the process is working as it's designed to work in Pennsylvania, and that election officials are doing their job to count every vote. I have some numbers for you today as far as how many absentee and mail-in ballots have been requested and returned. So as of today, total absentee and mail-in ballots requested are 1,136,685. When you look at Democrats and Republicans, 821,181 of those are Democrats, 213,204 are Republican. Now I'm only giving you Democrat and Republican numbers and not other parties. As far as absentee ballots requested, we have 100,248. 55,152 are Democratic and 34,880 are Republican. For mail-in ballots requested, the total number is 1,036,437. 766,029 are Democratic and 178,324 are Republican. And the total number of absentee and mail-in ballots returned are 52,522, which is a 4.6% return rate. So with 21 days to go until the November 1st deadline to request a mail-in or absentee ballot, we expect that total to rise dramatically. And given that counties can't pre-canvass return ballots until 7 a.m. on election day, it is reasonable that a thorough, accurate tally of all ballots will require several days worth of work. While I'm on the topic of mail ballots, I do have good news for those of you who are fans of statistics. Our webpage at vote.pa.gov/counting features a link to a spreadsheet with mail ballot data that will be updated each day around noon. Each daily mail ballot report spreadsheet will contain 3 tabs of information. The first tab will break out the data by county, how many total requests for mail-in and absentee ballots have been approved, and how many mail ballots have been returned so far. The second tab will drill down into the county level data on the absentee ballot numbers, and the third tab will drill down into the county level data on the mail-in ballot numbers. All of the tabs numbers will include both voters who are on the permanent mail-in ballot list and those who have requested a ballot for just this election and have been approved to receive one. These numbers are also broken down by party affiliation. We know the importance of this type of data. And given our commitment to transparency about election administration, we wanted to provide a simple online format to view these numbers daily. It's vitally important that you understand, however, that each day's spreadsheet will be a point-in-time snapshot of a continuously moving process. The data will be pulled from the statewide Uniform Registry of Electors, known as the SHORE system, and it will reflect the activity recorded in that system by each county as of the time the data is pulled. So again, I thank you for joining me today for this media education briefing on what's new for the 2022 general election. And I will now turn it back to Amy Gully, who will help us get to your questions.
Thank you, Secretary. We will now move to questions. First will be Barbara Barr from WG going to ask you to
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Acting Secretary, the U.S. Supreme Court has just struck down a previous court ruling that Pennsylvania should count undated mail-in ballots. Do you have a reaction?
It's a little hard to hear you, but I think you're asking me about the Supreme Court ruling.
Yes, that's the Supreme Court ruling striking down the earlier ruling that mail-in ballots should be counted that have no date.
Yes, my staff just let me know about this right before the this briefing. So we're reviewing that decision and we'll provide guidance to counties accordingly.
Any initial reaction?
You know, it's active litigation, so I'm unfortunately unable to comment any further.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will move to Jan. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Secretary. Well, you know, given that you're not in a position to offer a comment on that ruling, I guess I was just wondering if you could offer a comment. It seems like in past elections, there's been so much rancor over the lack of uniformity, you know, across counties. And do you expect to see, you know, counties dealing with, you know, curing ballots and undated ballots? Do you expect to see that done more consistently this time around?
You know, that's a very good question. As I mentioned in my remarks, the department issues guidance and directives, and we expect counties to follow those guidance and directives. So, you know, I know there's a lot of late breaking news, there's litigation, and what my team does is right as right away, when we have an order, we contact the county so they have a clear understanding of what the current state of the law is and what they need to do for this election. And so that's something that we will continue to do. And we expect that counties, follow the law and follow our guidance.
Next will be Crispin Havener from WJIC. Crispin, please unmute yourself.
Secretary, I'm sure as you know, there's been a lot of lack of confidence in some sectors about the election since 2020. There was a report put out in the past week here by a bipartisan group out of Washington saying that they're concerned about poll workers and the fact that there's mounting concerns that those temporary election workers are being recruited and trained by organizations with nefarious intent. What do you guys do in the Secretary of State's office to ensure that those temporary workers, as well as the county workers who do this year round, to ensure that they are all on the up and up and doing everything as they're supposed to?
Thank you for that question. And as you know, in 2017, election infrastructure has been designated as critical infrastructure. So, as a result, we've been able to partner with our federal partners, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, also our state partners, to make sure that counties have the tools and resources to ensure that they are being protected against threats and they have training. So a few things that we've done recently is we've had some extensive tabletop exercises that the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and other federal partners and state partners have conducted with our counties. We had one that was on insider threat training just a few weeks ago. We're going to have one on de-escalation training very shortly. And, one thing that's important when it comes to poll workers is, poll workers have to take an oath of office just like I do. They have to make sure that they're upholding both the United States Constitution and the Pennsylvania Constitution. They go through extensive training. So, counties definitely, have those tools that in case there is an issue that they're able to address that properly.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Mark Scalfaro from the Associated Press. Mark, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good morning, Secretary. Thanks for doing this. If you'll forgive me, I want to go back to the issue of the new Supreme Court ruling, just for the more narrow question of, is it accurate to say that the current guidance from the Department of State is to count ballots that lack a date on the exterior security envelope? And if that's the case, can you go far enough today, based on the Supreme Court ruling, to say that guidance will change somehow, even if you haven't determined how? Or is it possible it won't change?
On our website right now, the current guidance is for counties to count ballots that are missing a date or have the wrong date. As far as the impact on what happened with the Supreme Court, I'm not able to comment further. But what I can say is that, we will evaluate and update guidance as necessary.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Sam Dunklow from WITF. Sam, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Secretary. Thanks again for doing this. Wondering if we can turn to risk limiting audits. If you could just explain why all counties are being required to do this, as opposed to just some of the ones that were piloting the program, and again, why risk limiting audits were chosen as opposed to any other type of audit standard. I don't know that that's really all that clear at this point.
Sure. So this came out of a settlement agreement in the Stein versus Cortez litigation. And so Department of State was directed through that to direct all 67 counties to perform a risk limiting audit by the November 2022 general election. So that's what we're doing. And as you know, risk limiting audits are really the gold standard of audits, what we have today, as far as different types of audits, they're the best around. So That's why we had pilots so counties could get familiar with the process. And in addition to conducting the risk limiting audits, counties are also required to conduct the 2% audit that's required under the Pennsylvania Election Code.
Next, we'll go to Mike Corcigner from CBS 21. Mike, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Secretary. You mentioned the fact that you obviously send the guidance down to the counties, and then that's after your interpretation, both legally and of the rules that are set forth. And then obviously the counties and their solicitors take a look at that guidance. And there's been, depending on geography and political affiliation, kind of different interpretations of how to take that guidance. Do the counties face any type of penalties, sanctions, other types of problems if they do not follow the guidance that the Department of State levies?
You know, as I mentioned before, we expect counties to both follow our guidance and directives. It's really a case-by-case scenario, but in the event that a county does not follow our guidance, you know, the Department of State, we will evaluate that. You know, we usually make every effort to contact that county before we take any type of action to make sure that they understand the guidance, what's expected of them. And then if needed to take further legal action, we will definitely consider that.
Next, we'll go to Ford Turner from the Morning Call. Ford, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, Secretary. Thanks for doing this. I wanted to ask about drop boxes and monitoring them. There's been some pushback in both Lehigh County and Chester County about what's going on with the watching of these drop boxes. Can you state clearly what the guidance is to counties on monitoring these boxes? And do you have anything to say about the litigation that's been filed in Lehigh County on these drop boxes?
Thanks for that question. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think I got the gist of your question. So the Department of State supports drop boxes. We have guidance on our website that you are welcome to review, and it talks through what best practices are when counties do decide to have drop boxes for their voters. We do recommend that they're monitored, that they're secure, that they're monitored, whether that's by security cameras or by other means. The concerns that I had specifically related to Lehigh County and in the primary election, and also Berks County in this election, actually sent a letter in both instances expressing concerns around, well, in Berks County, sheriffs questioning voters at drop boxes around whether or not that they were returning their own ballots. You know, the law in Pennsylvania is you're only allowed to return your own ballot unless you have a designated agent for them, unless someone who has a disability has designated you to return their ballot for them. And so my concern is that when there's law enforcement presence, when there's questioning of voters at drop boxes, there could be potential for voter intimidation. You know, a lot of voters might not even decide to show up and return their ballot because of that concern. So I did send a letter to both Berks for this election and also to Lehigh and during the primary election, expressing my concerns.
Next, we'll go to Lauren Make from NBC 10. Lauren, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, hi, good morning. You referenced the continuous counting as one of the changes that will be happening now for this election. What happens if a county doesn't have the staff or the ability for some other reason to continuously count ballots? What happens to that county? Is there help available? And what happens with those ballots? Are they then somehow in jeopardy?
So that's a good question. Under Act 88 of 2022, you know, counties received $45 million in funding, which was great. You know, counties need to be fully funded to administer elections, and they could spend their portion of that money on staffing. So among other, you know, prescribed items they could spend money on. So, it would be prudent for counties who might have difficulty with the continuous counting to use some of those funds to hire additional staff so they could have appropriate shifts to continuously count ballots. I visited Dauphin County just a few weeks ago, and they showed me some of their voting equipment, and they said that with this new voting equipment, they can run ballots through it and they can be done within a couple of hours. So it really depends on each county, what type of voting equipment they have, and what their infrastructure looks like, but they did receive funds that they could spend on hiring additional staff.
But that night, if they, for some reason, are not able to continuously count, what happens?
We'll have to evaluate that on a case-by-case basis. And they can also lose their grant if they don't continuously count.
We'll turn to our last question from Will McDuffie. Will, you should be able to.
Hey, Secretary, thanks for taking our questions. There's on the statewide ballot is someone who, raised questions about the last election. A lot of his supporters bring up this issue, election integrity, as one of their main reasons for voting this fall. And I'm wondering if any of the changes around reporting intimidation have anything to do with that particular candidate, Doug Mastriano, and whether you have begun planning for the possibility that as results come in days later, he or his supporters might issue challenges to those results. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, as you know, I'm appointed by the governor. I'm a nonpartisan election official, so I don't comment on what one candidate says or does. But my job is to ensure that every eligible voter in Pennsylvania can register to vote, cast their ballot, and have it counted. Also, that counties are following the law, they're following our guidance as well. So, I think it's important that voters have confidence in our elections here in Pennsylvania. Counties are ready to run a secure, accessible election in November. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us, especially those who are in this room, to let voters know that, and to also let voters know what the process is in Pennsylvania. Tell voters that county election officials aren't able to start pre-canvassing ballots until 7 a.m. So that's why it takes us days to get our results. We're not like Florida that has weeks to pre-canvass. So until the General Assembly passes that legislation, it's going to take a few days. It doesn't mean anything nefarious is happening. It just means that every eligible vote is being counted. And it's important for me, for the counties, for the media, for everyone to continuously tell voters that, so they understand what the process is like in Pennsylvania.